Hello, this is a quick video for Project Dalek members who've been asking to see how I've wired up my Dalek. So if you've ever wondered how a Dalek works on the inside when it's been motorised, this is the solution that I've come up with. So let me just show you this. Okay, so the first thing you'll notice is we have the battery tray, and this is where the battery is going to go to take all the supplies that the Daleks use. I have mentioned on my previous video what battery I am using for this, so we won't go into that. But this is where the battery sits. Sits in a little tray that I've made, and then you've got a couple of straps just to hold this down. And then to connect the battery up, there's two lots of connections. You've got one connector here, which is being used for the auxiliary circuits, like that. And then on the other side of the Dalek, you've got the Anderson connector, which goes into this little custom-made bracket there. So, what happens to that electric from the battery? So firstly, the negative supply is running 8mm cable back to a negative post at the back of the Dalek, which I'll show you in a minute, and then the live wire goes down through the Anderson connector into this miniature circuit breaker here on this little custom board. Now that miniature circuit breaker acts exactly the same as a fuse, but it means you don't have to carry spare fuses. So if you had a short circuit or something went wrong with the wiring, you just press that little button and it resets, providing you've obviously got rid of the fault. The one above it is a 10 amp miniature circuit breaker, and that is for the auxiliary circuits, which consist of the Mark Mod voice modulator, dome lights, gun, and some under fender LEDs. And the supply for that also goes through this connector, the power pole, through that circuit breaker and then to the back of the Dalek, and I'll show you that in a second. So let's go to the back of the Dalek and I'll just show you what I've done around the back. So around the back of the Dalek you've got a custom made control panel, which is 3mm acrylic. Choose to use clear acrylic just because I like to see all the wiring and stuff and you can identify faults. So let's talk about the wiring for the motors first off. I've actually fitted that supply from the circuit breaker, comes back through the motor box, which is this, onto this isolator switch. And the reason I've put an isolator in there is that if you ever wanted to have someone sit in the Dalek and mess around with the voice modulator, but you don't want them to be able to actually drive it, you can isolate the supply so they can't actually accidentally drive the Dalek into somebody. And then to turn the supply on, it's just a live wire that's actually broken. You just insert the key and turn it on, and now the Dalek is live. That feed then goes into the motor controller under the seat and then up through to the joystick. So if we look at the joystick on top, you just turn it on. Dalek is now live and you can actually drive the Dalek. Mess around with it like that, and then to turn it off, press the button and it goes off. So that is the motor control circuits. Now the auxiliary supply uses a 24 volt feed from the battery via that 10 amp circuit breaker we talked about. It's all run in 2.5mm stranded copper wire, and that will handle around 30 amps, so it's plenty of power what the modulator is going to need. So the first place it goes is into the buck step down converter, and that's what this little silver thing is here. Now you can buy these on eBay, and it's a variable converter really, so it converts anything from 30 volts to 20 volts down to anything between 30 and 20 and as low as 5 volts I think, and it's actually adjustable, so you can set this at whatever voltage you need, and it's rated at 10 amps, so that's more than enough for the actual subsidiary circuits on the Dalek. Negative wires from the battery all connect on this negative post, and I've kept them separate. There's one for all the auxiliary circuits, and there's also one for the motor circuits, because I didn't want interference on the circuits. So from the buck step down converter, it goes into this fuse box, and it's split 4 ways from there via those pink wires, again all running 2.5 cable. And it goes up to these toggle switches at the top. And there's 4 toggle switches. You've got one for the modulator, dome lights, gun, and the under fender LEDs. So I'll talk about the under fender LEDs first. The under fender LEDs is a red, green, blue strip LED, which I've actually secured to the inside of the fender, and they also come with a remote control as well. So you can actually change the colours, have them flash, do whatever you like. And it runs from the LED switch, the live wire, into this little LED junction box where I connect them up to the red green strips. And then this little thing here is just a dongle for the remote control, so I can change the colour. So I'll just demonstrate that. So we just turn the LED lights on. If I quickly turn the lights off in here, you can see that at the moment it's on a phasing pattern, but it's fully adjustable. And I'll just demonstrate that actually. You have to point the remote control at that little dongle. So that's red, green, blue, white, and then there's a whole pattern of, you can have it phasing, you can do all sorts with these, and there we are, that's what they look like. So that's the LEDs, very low powered. Now to power the gun and the dome lights, the feed come off the toggle switches, and they're going to go through this connector here, which is a super seal connector, and that will plug into the skirt when it's sitting on top, and then go off to the gun and the dome lights. So that's how I've wired the back of the Dalek up. Places I've bought stuff from are a company called CPC, which is an electrical company in the UK that supply components and things like that, as well as the usual eBay and Amazon. And a lot of these toggle switches and the fuse box and the isolator switch all come from a company called Car Builder Solutions, and they supply parts for kit car builders, and again they're based in the UK. So that's the rear of the Dalek. Now let's just quickly talk about the front of the Dalek, and I'll show you where the modulator sits. So my voice modulator is from Vince Martin and his Mark Mark 5. It's a brilliant voice modulator, and it works really well. The connections on here is you've got 2 outputs on the top, which is for your speakers, and you can plug your speakers into those. You've also got a audio input there which comes up onto my mobile phone holder, and then you can just plug your mobile phone in and play music or whatever you want to do. And then on the other side of the Mark Mod, you've got this thing here, which is a Bluetooth microphone receiver, which is USB chargeable, and I use that with this little headset here, and I find that's brilliant. There's no interference, you don't get any cables crackling, and you get a very clear voice. The only trouble with it is the batteries don't last very long, so you have to take a spare, or just take a spare microphone with a wire on it. And then you can't really see it, but on the opposite side of this is another little input jack, and that is for the press to talk or the gun button. And the way I've done my gun is I didn't want to have it on the actual gun itself. I wanted a floor operated foot switch. So again, you can't really see it, but in some little conduit there's a little wire that runs to the front of the Dalek through this little junction box, and then I've got a floor mounted exterminate button, so I'll just demonstrate that. It might help if I turn the modulator on. So the modulator's now live, and then if you push your foot down on this switch, nothing happens because I haven't plugged in the speakers. So let me just demonstrate that by plugging the speaker in very quickly. There we are. And there's your exterminate button. So that's quite handy being on the floor like that. So I hope that's helped. If you've got any questions, just send me a message below. I hope that's useful. This is not saying this is the best way to do it. This is just the way that I've done it. So I hope you find that useful. And again, any questions, just contact me below.